on this week's FAS TV. We meet the founders of Herd Advance and hear about their Stockman system, a real-time precision performance and health monitoring system with integrated remote drafting and selection. We hear from vet Tim Geratghty on how this new tech can reduce stress in cattle handling and ultimately improve cattle health and efficiency. And we also hear from farmer Robbie Newlands on his experience of using Stockman and the benefits for his finishing enterprise.
Herd Advance is an agri-tech company that we started up here on farm in Aberdeenshire. We've been in business now for a number of years, principally around research and development. And the reason for that is that we've been taking idea and innovation through from concept to commercial and now to market. And it came about because as farmers ourselves, we were really struggling with labour and sourcing labour on farm. We, as a farm, are an arable beef farm, I suppose a traditional mixed family farm here in Aberdeenshire. And my co-founder, who's also my husband, he really had or felt a need where we couldn't find a solution to handling cattle in a quiet way, but with as little people involved as possible. It was typically something that took 3-4 of us most of the day, stressed us as individuals, but more importantly stressed the cattle by the way that they have to be put through a raceway, put through a weigh system, and all the sort of manual entry that came off the back of that. We came up with what is now our technology that we've taken to market, and that technology is called Stockman. And what Stockman is essentially it's an all-in-one integrated system combining those two areas of need that we had ourselves on farm, and that was to handle and draft and select cattle automatically, remotely, without the need for human intervention. And then, as well as that, provide us with the data that would give us the insight on each of our individual animals. So what Stockman currently measures is the weight of the animal as they use the system, the water intake that they drink while they're in the system, and also we use thermal imaging to now at the moment look at body temperature, but we want to develop that further to look at other areas of the animal. And all of that information is then collected in our cloud-based portal, and then that's available to the farmer via their phone or their iPad or their computer. And what we do is we take that data, trends for that animal itself. You can see that animal against the group or the pen or the herd. Ultimately, it's about seeing change for that animal and alerting the farmer to that as quickly as possible, so that they can use that information to better make a decision of what they want to do. And that decision could be around ration change, potential treatment required.
So the Stockman system is a system that allows us to capture weight and water data. The cattle use it autonomously, so we don't need to be around when they're using it. Once their tag is read, the gates will close. That is the point where we capture the data. Going by the criteria in the system, they will either be drafted or returned to the source pen. So these guys are just going back in, so once they finish drinking, they'll leave, gates will reset, and then we'll reopen again.
So when we capture all of that data for that individual animal and it's held within the portal, we then do a level of analysis on that to provide the farmer with insight on that animal. So that's where the reporting and the alerting then comes in. I think it's important to say that all of the data that we're capturing is the animal's data and the herd's data, so that ultimately is the farmer's data. And I think in terms of being responsible for that as a data technology company, we have to ensure that that data is controlled and managed and looked after appropriately. So at the moment we have 4 units that have been out on trialling and demoing, and that's been really successful, and we've had great relationships built up with the farmers that have been involved in that, and you'll see more speaking with Robbie Newlands at our Cluny farm, who has been trialling and demoing systems for us. And then our next stage is we're building what we're calling an early adopter program of systems. So we've got 10 of those going out that are on pre-order at the moment, and they are our, if you like, our first batch of commercialised systems that are going into the marketplace. So that's really an exciting and very busy time going to be for us over the next three to 4 months. We manufacture Stockman ourselves. We take all the steel fabrication in-house and do all of the welding and processing piece. And then we have partners in electronics and pneumatics who provide us with packages that come in. We then do the fabrication, assemble the cabling and electronics, and do a full testing commissioning of the system before it goes out. We also do all the installation and servicing in-house as well. I think what's really important certainly for us, when we've been developing the system, has been ensuring that everything that we've done in the development has been around the cattle themselves and how it's very much an animal-led development. We started out with our first sort of prototype system, and it was very much focused around sensor technology and sensors triggering and actioning the hardware. And what we found with that was that in the environments that we're in within agriculture, you know, a speck of dust, moisture, you're dealing with animals, so you're always going to get a lick or a tail flick, and those were continuously putting these sensors out of kilter. The other thing we realised is how intelligent cattle are, particularly in problem solving, and that has spent many hours. We've been fortunate that we've always had visual cameras on our system, so we've always been able to see and monitor the behaviour of the animals when we've been trialling and using and developing the system. So after, you know, many hours of that, you can see how smart they are, how quick they are at figuring things out. And one of the very early days was around timing, and then being able to work out timings of things. So a lot of our sensors were on time-based triggers, and they were working that out within hours, and being able to come in the wrong way of the gate systems, and the flow just wasn't working. So that's been a massive learning curve for us, and we've had probably now about 3,500 cattle through demonstrators and trialling of the system. And within that, we've had pretty much most of the main UK breeds. Further on in our development was we developed a training mode for the system. As I say, some breeds, and when we first started out, we didn't even think about training, because we had a breed of cattle that literally walked onto the system, wasn't phased, flowed through, worked the thing beautifully. And then we started bringing in other, particularly more native breeds, who started to be a bit more sensitive. So we realised quite soon that those animals needed just a day or two more in terms of training. So what we do with the training is that the full, if you like, water station, EID reader, thermal camera moves right to the entrance piece of the system. And for the first couple of days, those animals learn where their water source is, they're accessing it. Importantly for the farmer, we're telling the farmer that, because the EID is picking up which animals are coming to the system, what we're seeing. And that just gives peace of mind that all your animals are drinking and they're all accessing. And then over the next few days, how it works is you move that back into the next position, so that the animals learn that they have to take an initial step up, so they have their first couple of feet. So essentially we're front weighing at that point, but that gives us a good starter as to for the algorithms to see the weights of those animals at that point. And then it takes about a week in total, 10 days in some circumstances, for those animals to then get to the point where they're flowing freely through the system at that point. And that just allows us to give cattle who've never been on the system or seen a system like this before just that little bit of extra time and comfort. When you've got cattle that have been on the system and you're introducing new cattle into the pen, what we find there is that training isn't required, because they are seeing and they learn super quick off the other cattle that this is where they water and this is what they do. So it's not a necessity at that point, it's just typically when you've got cattle coming in as a big group for the first time. In terms of numbers, the system itself can take up to 100 head per unit. We have done trials where we've increased that, and comfortably, realistically, you know, a unit could do up to 120, and depending on rations, basically a more wet forage type based diet, you can do more, but we recommend around the 100 as a comfortable headage per unit.
When the cattle have been with the system for a number of months and you have been watching their growth rates, and you get to a point where you can actually see where that animal starts to plateau, and you can select a target weight that you want to achieve. Once you have either seen that animal plateau or hit the target, you can select to draft. Now the drafting criteria is a multiple criteria, so it can be on any information via the passport, any information that has been gathered by the system, and multiples of them. So for instance, if you were taking out some bull and heifers out of a group of heifers, you could say you want all the Angus cross heifers that will be 16 months on the 1st of May and have hit a certain growth rate, and the system will give you a report, show you those animals, and then you can apply, and those animals will be drafted over the next few hours. We normally recommend that if you are putting away to slaughter, then or going to the mart, you would initiate the draft. You initiate the draft the day before, so that the animals have a 24-hour period to be drafted out. You'll find once a draft starts, if the animals are going into a neighbouring pen, it engages the rest of the group to start using the system more, because they realise that something is happening and they're very inquisitive, and they want to know what's happening. So it almost speeds up the process.
I think what's key with the drafting piece and that integration that the system provides is, you know, there is an element of change in operational practice. So where you would perhaps plan to sort cattle, weigh cattle, handle cattle, typically in more traditional methods, you know, and you'd need a number of people to do that. The system is doing all of that automatically for you. So it's getting into that thinking that, you know, I can be going off and doing something else while that's happening. So you don't have that labour and time requirement to do it. Also, the system can be selecting cattle based on the criteria that you give it. But we've got examples where other farmers, they're still looking through their cattle as normal, and they're still selecting based on what they would typically have selected on more traditionally. And then they're essentially putting that draft into the system to pick out those cattle for them. So it can do both ways. So you can still utilise it through your own input, or you can have a fully automated selection criteria, if you like, from the system itself.
I was delighted to get the opportunity to be a bit more involved here. The Practice has been providing veterinary care to the farm here for multiple generations, and it's just wonderful to see that extending again. And as things develop, as they tend to do, we're seeing awesome innovation here with farm-built, farm-designed products as the farm essentially diversifies to some extent, and we are extremely fortunate to be able to provide both veterinary and a little bit of research advice to them as they progress the product. I would say the majority of the research and certainly the clinical work I've done has ultimately what you end up looking at and speaking about is managing stress within cattle systems. So long before coming here, I've been very interested in how we can try to reduce stress at any stage in cattle production systems. And the reason for that is quite straightforward. Stress and cortisol production, which is one of the main stress markers, switches off the immune system. It's the same in humans, it's something very relatable, but it happens extensively in cattle. So when we stress an animal out, what we're asking it to do is shut down its immune system, and it leaves it much, much more vulnerable to all diseases, whether they're endemic or new ones coming into the herd for the first time. When I first started speaking to Murdoch and Jilly about the Herd Advance Stockman, I got immediately really excited because the first clear health benefit is a reduction in stress in the systems where it's installed. And I would refer explicitly to handling stress, so bringing cattle through a crush, through a race system. We know we do that gently, we know how to do it quietly, and we can always try to mitigate or modify our behaviour to make that as stress-free for cattle as possible. But even when we do that, you'll always notice a knock-off in weight gains for a period of time after the handling, which is a direct result of stress through the handling system. So the opportunity here to gather weight gain information without the need for a handling is an immediate health gain, and got me extremely excited. I wanted to know more and look in more detail at the product and see what it could teach us. Not only are we taking stress out of the system, the other massive one is early detection. Now, it really doesn't matter which disease you want to pick up on, and again, we'll know this from ourselves, and we hear this all the time from the medics and NHS, etc. Early detection and early intervention always leads to better health outcomes. The sooner that we can start an effective treatment when disease has occurred, the better. So what we're seeing here again is an outstanding early detection system. Water intakes, visits to the crate, daily weights, 3, 4, 5 times a day, daily weights, really accurate, is clearly that information can be quickly combined into a very powerful algorithm to say something's not right. And it's very likely, unless you've got an awful lot of spare time on your farm, it's very likely that that will detect a problem faster than a stockman who's got a lot of other tasks to do will manage. And that early detection is a godsend. We're now integrating a thermal camera, and so that's already installed in the current systems. That's measuring temperature of the animal every time, every single visit. And as soon as those algorithms develop, we'll be also combining in. It's the equivalent of having a vet in the pen taking a rectal temperature, except it's of every animal in the pen every day, and it's with no stress handling, no need for any time or stress on the animal to get that information. So again, the early detection of that, obviously with this type of class of stock, we'll be thinking largely about pneumonia, respiratory disease. Being able to pick that up before most stockmen would have managed is another game changer. And again, that animal, not only is it detected, it's shed out, it's in a handling pen where you can go and have a closer look. And if it's correct and it does need a treatment, that's been given far earlier than it could have been before, and another huge health win.
Robbie Newlands farms 1,100 acres alongside his wife Kirsty at Cluny on the outskirts of Forres. A traditional upland beef and sheep farm with 180 spring calving suckler cows and a flock of 700 mule ewes. All progeny is finished off farm using homegrown forage and barley, with the fattening heifers on the Stockman system.
I knew Murdoch Duncan prior to getting the Stockman, and Murdoch asked if we would be interested in trialling one. So we installed the Stockman and trialled it, and really liked it. It's made this building here where we have it, we managed to get it put in a position where the Stockman was sitting, where it's an old building, it's under a loft, it's a bit of the steading that we couldn't use. Can't get in with tractors or anything, it was a bit dead area. so it didn't go away with any of the cattle court, if you like, for space. And we managed to fit it in here. The cattle come out to what was an old door at that side, through the Stockman, and exit the Stockman back in another door. And when we come to shed off cattle, it's made life so much easier because the Stockman actually I can set what cattle I want. The Stockman will then shed those cattle out. As they come through, they shed off and go into another pen. So that when we're ready to put away fat cattle, they're standing in the pen ready for us. The only slight bit of organisation you have to do is maybe a day in front of where you would normally go and draw the cattle out. You have to give the machine time for them to flow through it, to have them in the pen. So we're setting the Stockman to draw them out maybe 10, 12 hours before we would have done it before. The Stockman, when we put it in, this buildings down here, we didn't have any weighing facilities. So when we were drawing heifers, we were drawing heifers by eye and making a judgment on the weight. By putting in the Stockman, it's allowed us to draw heifers at a more consistent weight. And we've actually increased the kill weight of our heifers by about 10 to 15 kilos dead weight, which, you know, 10 to 15 kilos doesn't sound a lot, but when the price was at almost £7 a kilo for a while there, or slightly above it for a wee while, you know, that amounts to a lot of money. So it's lifted the kill weight that wee bit. We're getting more consistent weights, and we're not landing in a position we were before when you put away a batch of heifers thinking, oh damn it, I should have held that one a bit longer because it's not quite as heavy as I thought it was. Because we didn't have the facility to weigh down here, and it wouldn't be easy to get the facility put in place to weigh here, this kind of fits the bill. When we drew fat cattle before, usually it was my wife Kirsty the night before, we would draw the heifers out ready for the lorry in the morning, and she would be on the end of the gate as the heifers flew past, and she didn't like it. So this has made it much safer. And for the cattle's sake, when we went to draw heifers, we run about 85 to 90 heifers in this shed. And when you go to walk through them normally, they'll lie about, they're unconcerned. But the minute you go and try and draw heifers out amongst them, they're going round the shed like a racing track, and it gets a bit exciting. So by putting this in, the heifers are drawn out as they would normally go in for a drink. The gate just opens a different way, and they're drawn out. Stress on us and stress on the beast has been reduced remarkably. I can go onto my phone, be looking at heifers in the shed and thinking, right, we need to get them away. I can check a weight, but I can also see a daily live weight gain on my phone. And you're not only looking at weight of the heifer to try and get her up to as big a weight as you can manage, but you're also seeing if the heifer is slowing down and she's eating more than she's putting on, sort of thing. So it definitely gives you, it just fills the picture a bit more about what the information you're using to make the system a wee bit more efficient than it was before. The crate as it stands just now was one of the first ones that, or earlier ones that Murdoch put out. There's an upgrade coming to put on a temperature sensor on it, and that for us will be a big help because when we wean the calves in November, they're springborn calves weaned in November, we take them into the shed. That's usually our danger time for pneumonias or whatever else. And to be able to see a beast with a spike in temperature or anything out of the usual, we'll probably see it. I would imagine you'll see a spike in temperature before you would see a beast being unwell. So hopefully we'll maybe manage to treat the beast with an anti-inflammatory before it actually gets unwell. We don't have a lot of bother with pneumonia, but it's the one that catches you out. It's a problem, and if it goes too far, it's difficult to fix, and it affects the beast a long time. This year we had, well, 80 to 90 heifers in there, and within 24 hours they were all going through it, no problem. So they don't take long to, and because there's nobody here while they're doing it, we can see them. There is a camera up above the Stockman, so we can see the cattle, we can watch them, keep an eye on them. But because there's no one here for the beast to get excited about, you know, somebody standing there watching them, they tend to be quite calm about it, and within 24 hours we're going through it fairly well. There was no issues at all.
If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, then why not check out our podcast Stock Talk at www.fas.scot/sounds, where we sat down with Jilly to go into a bit more detail about all things herd advance.